Welcome, everybody. So, today we're going to talk about a book called The Black Box Process by Matthew Syed. And this is a very, very interesting book because it's going to show you how you can have exponential personal growth. And as always, the extended analysis is going to be in the link below. The mind map is going to be in the link below. I appreciate you checking those out. Have a conversation below. Tell me what you learned from this book, and let's get started. So, what airplanes can teach us about personal growth? Now, I want you to kind of go back in the past a little bit and go in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. Now, air travel then was actually dangerous. There was a lot of failure rates, a lot of people died. But now, air travel is safer than you driving. Holy crap, what happened? Well, what happened was there was a culture shift. Whole industry changed from, well, we don't mess up to, well, we mess up, we need to learn. That's what happened. And that is something that's required for us to improve our lives. And that is something that is counter to what we are designed to do. So he starts with an example of war versus airplanes. And I love this quote from the book where it says, the right success matters. Success doesn't happen by mistake. It happens by following a method that is built upon over time. And we all want things to work right away. We want things to be like perfect right away, but that's not how life works. There's no such thing as perfection, and we have to work things over time. And it gives us two contrasts about war and airplanes. They both are kind of leading to death at that point. Even today, war does, but we don't learn from war, do we? We still go to war today. But airlines, on the other hand, have changed. What happened? Well, with airlines, they created a culture of transparency where mistakes, owning up to mistakes, and improving mistakes was rewarded. But at the same time, war, well, most politicians want to go to war, but they're not directly affected by it, and they don't really learn from it. That's why we keep on going into wars. Now, going back to the example airlines, well, that's why airlines improved, because they created a culture of truth. Because war and airlines both led to deaths, but one industry is not the safest, while the other, we keep on doing the same thing and again. So a way to look at it is this, and he gives an example of pilots and doctors. Well, pilots had an incentive to improve, right? Because if pilots make mistakes, they die. When doctors make mistakes, well, other people die, not them. So the pilots in the airline industry was more inclined to improvement than other industries. That's the culture they had to create out of necessity. Now, well, we all know we make mistakes, but why do we not improve? Well, in humans, we're psychologically kind of designed to be resistant to growth. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more later. But even though our brains are highly sophisticated, they're easily hacked. The emotional part of our brain is so much larger than our prefrontal cortex that it over often hijacks the logical brain, the emotional brain. And he gives this example of this cult, not a big cult, a small cult in the 1954. And this lady, Marianne Keech, predicts that the world's going to end in 1954. And aliens are going to save only a few of them. And she says, well, if you come and follow me, the aliens are going to save you and you're going to live. Well, what happened? A lot of people followed her. The news wrote about it, and then these scientists who are intrigued, like these scientists have a boring life, right? They're looking at data, they're doing research papers, boring. They look at this, they're like, I want to be an investigator. I want to go investigate what's happening, right? So they infiltrate this group, they go in this cult, and they started figuring out that, well, from the outside, it looks illogical, but people who are in that cult is very logical. Because what they learned is when the project failed. What do I mean by project failed? When the date happened, 1954, these people who have given up everything, the people who followed the cult gave up their lives, family, finances, jobs, house, everything. You know what they do? They double down on their efforts. You know what they said? They said, well, the godlike figure was so impressed with their faith that he has decided to give the whole earth a second chance. And they stated that they saved the world. Think about that. They saved the world. And isn't that awesome? Where you are the savior of the world. But I want you to kind of think of this in an empathetic way. Looking at outside, this is ridiculous, right? If you didn't know about it, you'd be like, well, this is just stupid. But people who are in there, these people quit their jobs, they gave up everything, they made fun of other people. Now you're telling them they're wrong? Well, isn't it easy just to look at the counter information and say, no, we're right, you're wrong? Because if they admit they're wrong, they've given us so much, it's going to be so painful. Why do that? Why go through that? So this is the natural resistance to growth. And this is something we have to outgrow to grow in every aspect of our life. That resistance, that default needs to be countered with the habit of seeking truth, with the habit of always going for the truth. The reason we are resistant to growth has a lot to do with internal anxiety. Now, believe it or not, we all have internal anxieties. That's just the way we are. Different people have different anxieties they have, but we all have it. And when we believe in something, when we have invested so much in it, we started to really believe it. And the counter information causes anxiety, which we do not want to go through. And why would you, right? It's anxiety causes pain, and it's not a good feeling to have. So, but why do we have this internal anxiety? Why are we kind of attracted to these cults? Well, the reason is because we humans need to believe in something big. It is ingrained in us. We need to believe that we have more knowledge than others. We need to believe that we have more access to resources than others. And subconsciously, it gives us a better chance of survival. Think about the old times, right? You had better information, aka you knew where the resources were. You would live longer, you would reproduce longer, right? If you look at nature itself, the whole nature is built upon survival and reproduction. And we are part of nature. So when we go in there, especially these groups who give you a sense of knowing more, filling a lot of your emotional needs, well, you're so vested in it that when the counter information comes in, well, it makes you feel less than, and you don't want to feel less than. So you create that perception where that counter information is false or it's fake, and you create your own, because the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Everything you look at, I want you to think about it this way. You're born with a hardware, aka your brain, your chemical balances, imbalances, your genetic predispositions. But your brain is very malleable. It is very malleable with what your information, what your thoughts are. And your thoughts, your information, your experiences, your memory, your interpretation of those experiences creates the software it runs through. So when new information comes through, it is going through that software for interpretation. So it's very important to understand that the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. You and me can look at the same evidence and have totally different conclusions. That's how we humans operate. And the more we are vested in that belief, the harder it is to get counter information. And what happens is we start flip-flopping our information. So if there's even a weak evidence, we're going to amplify it 100 times. And if there's an evidence that is obvious, we're going to kind of microscope it to so small that it doesn't matter at all. Or we're going to totally discount it. That is just the way we humans operate. And to a degree, there are certain blind spots I have that I don't see. There are certain blind spots you have you don't see. And we're going to work a little bit later on how you can counter yourself so you have a better chance of growth and opportunity. So now one thing that Matthew does talk about that I love in this book is fail your way to success. It really is. Because this was the hardest thing for me, is to take action, is to be okay with failure. And I want you to think about this. This is, put your thinking hat on and think. You're playing golf, right? And your culture, your personal culture is you want to improve at golf. That's what you want to do. You're just not doing for the heck of it. You want to improve. So you got two scenarios. You play golf in the dark where you don't know where you're hitting, and then you play golf in the dark, in light, where you know where your ball is going. Now, if your culture is to improve, what would you do? You would play in light, look where the ball is going, make small adjustment, and repeat those adjustments until you get to where you are, and then make that muscle memory. Correct? Right? That is what we need to do. We need to play in daylight. And such a great example by Matthew. Play in daylight. What that means is get the data. Know what you're doing so you can make adjustments. But you gotta be doing to make adjustments. Because the issue is we tend to be so inclined towards perfection that we don't take action. But there's no such thing as perfection. The reason we don't take action because we don't want to fail. Failure is painful. But once you make it a game, once you make failure an input to your whole process and nothing more, it changes the way you look at things. Because I want you to think of failures as compound interest, right? Compound interest, 5% is nothing, but over a period of 30 years, it's huge. The same with you inputting failures and correcting action, continual improvement. Over time, it is huge. And because if you want to be good at something, you gotta first be okay being bad at it and improve on it and then move on. And that's what we need to create, a culture where we embrace failures and we embrace continual improvement, because we're never going to have perfection. So far this is what we've learned. We've learned how black boxes in airlines help the airlines to improve, how we need to create our own black box in order to improve, how we are easily hacked and have this natural resistance to growth. And a lot of things we don't do is due to our internal anxieties. And then we got to take action to alleviate those anxieties, include the failures in our processes for continual improvement. And this is pretty much a summary of what we need to do. And what I call this, and what Matthew implies in his book, is the counter-human method. And what do I mean by counter-human method? Well, I know about gravity, right? If I know gravity exists, I will see it, but it exists. I'm aware of it. But am I immune to it? No, if I jump from a 10-story building, it's going to be the same result than anybody else. And that is what I mean by the counter-human method. We know we suffer from cognitive dissonance. We know we have issues. Well, we need to create our own methods to counter those issues. And the best thing that we have done as humans in the last 80, 90 years, extensively, is the scientific method. Because scientific method is about data. It's about being able to repeat on that data. And it's evaluated, aka peer-reviewed, by people who don't really care about you. They don't really care about you. So they don't have any biases, even though it is still flawed, but it's a lot less flawed than others we have. So employ the scientific method. Data on yourself. Evaluate yourself. Employ people in your life that will evaluate you. They're willing to say, no, sir, you are wrong. No, ma'am, you're wrong. That is very, very important to have in our lives. Second, the magic of marginal gains. Again, perfection is your enemy. Create hypotheses. Create small experiments to test those hypotheses, and then apply the principle from those small experiments into bigger experiments. Just like how we create vaccines today, how we create medications today from small to big. We do trials, we do clinical trials, we move on, we publish our data, we put it out there for the world to review, and then people build upon that. And there's a great example he gives about African books. And the reason I love this example, because there was the similar concept in the book called How Everything is Obvious and How Common Sense Fails Us. And it's a wonderful book because it tells you that complex ideas have sometimes complex solutions. When you're dealing with a large amount of people, large amount of cultures, common sense might fail you. So you need to experiment. You need to see what's going on so you can come up with a better hypothesis. So a Western volunteer organization, in the African book example he gives, they're thinking about, well, listen, if we give people books, we know books, when people read them, it's good for them and it changes their lives, so we need to give more people books. So let's give them books so they can be more educated, more knowledgeable, and do a better job with their country. Hypotheses. What do they do next? Well, they pick a small and test it, because instead of investing millions of dollars, why not start with a small sample and it works? Well, what they learned is language barrier. They're going to give books in English. Well, nobody knows how to read English. So what are they going to do? Well, what are you going to do if you've given a book in a different language you can't read? Well, you might burn it for fire, for fuel, or whatever, right? They learn language is going to be an issue. Now, can you imagine spending $100 million and getting books that nobody can read? That would have been bad, right? So there's no golden bullet. Marginal gains is golden bullet. The more we do it, the more we experiment, the better results we get. And the same thing we talked about earlier, common sense. He gives an example of Scared Straight. And that example kind of stick with me, because when you watch Scared Straight, your common sense says, listen, these kids, yeah, they're going to be scared. They're not going to do it again, right? But the long-term study they did, you know what they found? It doesn't work that way. Kids, were more inclined to do bad stuff when they went through scared straight. That is so bizarre, isn't it? Goes against the common sense we have, because human nature is a very complex thing. That is why it is very good to test your common sense when it comes to complex ideas. See, I don't have to test my common sense if I'm walking, but I should test it when I'm talking about big economic policies. It is very important because a lot of times common sense does not work when it comes to complex ideas. So, a quick recap. We learned about how it is important to have a black box process. Matthew talks about how we are resistant to growth, how we counter evidence because of our internal anxieties, and we talked about the counter human method. So I hope this video provided with a lot of value. Leave in the comment below and tell me, what are you gonna do with this information? What is one action step, just one, not 5, 6, 7, just one action step you're gonna take today in order for you to grow, in order for you to employ black box thinking? And remember, this one video is not gonna change your life, but if you get these principles and you write them down and you practice over time, I'm telling you, once they become a habit, it changes your life. So let's have a conversation. Check out the extended analysis in the description below. The mind map is in the description below. And I'm going to see you in the next video. Have a great day. Bye-bye.